A fragile dawn. The new ceasefire proposal. The air in Gaza hangs thick. It is heavy with the dust of shattered buildings and the scent of despair. For months, for years, this narrow strip of land has known little but conflict and sorrow. Each sunrise brings not just light, but the stark reminder of loss, and the gnawing fear of what the day might hold. Children have grown up knowing only the sounds of explosions and the sight of rubble. Hope here is a fragile commodity, hoarded carefully, easily extinguished. Yet, amidst this bleak landscape, a faint glimmer has appeared. A whisper of a possibility for a pause in the relentless cycle of violence that has consumed so many lives. From Washington, a new ceasefire proposal has been put forward. An initiative led by the United States. It suggests a 60-day truce, a period intended to halt the fighting and allow for critical humanitarian aid to reach those in desperate need. This is not the first attempt to silence the guns, of course. The path to peace in this region is littered with the wreckage of failed negotiations and broken promises. However, any new effort is met with a desperate, albeit cautious, desire for respite. The details emerging suggest a multi-stage plan, beginning with this initial cessation of hostilities, a chance for the people of Gaza to catch their breath in this suffocating open prison. Remarkably, reports have surfaced indicating that Hamas, the governing authority in Gaza, has provisionally agreed to the core tenets of this American-led proposal. This development, confirmed by various sources including Al Jazeera and CNN, initially sparked a cautious wave of optimism. Their acceptance, however, is reportedly contingent upon several specific conditions. These conditions are understood to involve the release of a specified number of Israeli hostages, including the tragic return of those already deceased. In return, a significant number of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails would be freed, a deeply sensitive and complex aspect of any potential agreement. This tentative step towards de-escalation was almost immediately met with a strong countercurrent of skepticism. Senior U.S. officials have been quick to downplay the notion of a finalized agreement, expressing significant reservations about the feasibility of the terms. The New York Times reported that U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff described Hamas's stated conditions as completely unacceptable, a blunt assessment that tempers any rising hopes. Simultaneously, Israeli leadership has publicly dismissed the idea of an imminent ceasefire, asserting that the current terms proposed by Hamas do not align with Israel's stated war objectives, primarily the complete dismantling of Hamas's military capabilities and the return of all hostages. The skepticism emanating from Washington is palpable and casts a significant pall over the ceasefire discussions. American officials, who are funded and backed by AIPAC, a lobby group of Israel, have been keen to limit expectations. They stress that the gap between the parties remains wide. Of course, the gap would be high when Israel claims it intends to eliminate all Palestinian strength to resist. The conditions laid out by Hamas, particularly concerning the scope and scale of prisoner exchanges and future security arrangements for Gaza, are seen by some AIPAC reps in the US administration as insurmountable obstacles at this present juncture. This cautious stance reflects a deep understanding of the complexities involved and the bitter history of previous failed attempts to broker a lasting peace in this troubled region. Israeli leaders have been even more unequivocal in their dismissal of the current proposal as it stands with Hamas's conditions. According to the Times of Israel, the government in Jerusalem views the demands as a non-starter, fundamentally incompatible with their long-term security aims for the region. They argue that any pause in fighting must lead to a situation where Hamas can no longer pose a threat to Israel. The idea of releasing a large number of Palestinian prisoners, potentially including individuals convicted of serious offences, remains a deeply contentious issue domestically within Israel, adding another layer of complexity to the already fraught negotiations. The memory of past ceasefires, those that held for a few weeks or months, only to collapse back into violence, looms large. The January 2025 ceasefire, for instance, which brought a temporary halt to hostilities, eventually broke down amidst mutual recriminations. Israel accused Hamas of rearming and preparing new attacks, whilst Hamas alleged that Israel had violated the terms of the agreement. This history of mistrust and broken agreements makes any new proposal inherently fragile. Each side approaches the negotiating table burdened by past grievances and a profound lack of faith in the other's intentions, making sustained peace an elusive goal. For the vulnerable people of Gaza, this diplomatic dance between hope and despair is an agonizingly familiar experience. News of a potential ceasefire can bring a momentary surge of relief, a fleeting vision of children playing safely in the streets, or families rebuilding their shattered lives. However, this is quickly tempered by the harsh political realities and the pronouncements of leaders. The constant uncertainty exacerbates the already immense psychological toll of the conflict. They are caught in a cruel limbo, yearning for an end to the suffering, but wary of investing too much hope in promises that have so often proven hollow. The diplomatic maneuvers unfold against a backdrop of an ever-deepening humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. The scale of suffering is immense, a relentless accumulation of loss and deprivation. Basic necessities like clean water, food, and medical supplies are critically scarce. Hospitals, overwhelmed and often damaged by shelling, struggle to cope with the constant influx of casualties. The infrastructure, already fragile before the latest escalations, now lies in ruins in many areas. Entire neighborhoods have been reduced to uninhabitable landscapes of twisted metal and concrete, a testament to the brutal intensity of the conflict that has raged for so long. A recent horrifying incident underscores the devastating impact on civilians. An Israeli attack on a United Nations-run school, a place that should have been a sanctuary, reportedly resulted in the deaths of at least 36 Palestinians. According to BBC News, the majority of the victims were women and children who had sought refuge there, believing they would be safe under the UN flag. Such events send shockwaves of grief and anger through the community, and raise profound questions about the protection of civilians in conflict zones. It also raises the question of whether the UN is indeed fit for purpose, or does the capitalist grip of Israel control it? Each such tragedy adds another layer to the collective trauma experienced by the Gazan population. Adding to the pervasive fear and uncertainty, the Israeli military has issued new evacuation orders for large swaths of southern Gaza. These directives, disseminated through leaflets and media broadcasts, instruct residents to move from areas designated for impending military operations. For families already displaced multiple times, these orders bring fresh waves of panic and despair. They face an impossible choice: to stay in areas targeted for attack or to flee once more, with no guarantee of safety or shelter elsewhere in the densely populated and besieged territory. The scenes of families gathering meager belongings and trekking towards uncertain destinations are heartbreaking. These evacuation orders are widely interpreted as a precursor to a significant escalation in military activity. Reuters reported that officials have described this as potentially leading to an unprecedented attack on the territory. This ominous warning fuels fears of even greater civilian casualties and further destruction. The prospect of intensified operations in the south, an area already struggling to accommodate hundreds of thousands of displaced people, is deeply alarming to humanitarian organizations. They warn that the capacity to provide aid and protect civilians is already stretched beyond its limits, and a new offensive would be catastrophic. The international community now watches with bated breath as an announcement regarding the ceasefire negotiations is anticipated from United States President Donald Trump. The Guardian reports that such a statement is expected imminently. Given America's significant influence in the region and its role in formulating the current proposal, President Trump's words will be scrutinized intensely. His administration has been actively involved, with envoys working behind the scenes, but the path forward remains shrouded in uncertainty. The weight of expectation is enormous, as any pronouncement could significantly alter the trajectory of this conflict. What this anticipated announcement might entail is a subject of intense speculation across diplomatic circles and newsrooms worldwide. Will it signal a breakthrough, a moment where both sides have found enough common ground to pause the bloodshed, even if only temporarily? Or will it confirm the prevailing skepticism, acknowledging that the chasm between Hamas and Israel is too wide to bridge at this moment? There is also the possibility of a new approach, perhaps a modified proposal or increased pressure on one or both parties to make further concessions. The stakes are incredibly high, with countless lives hanging in the balance. Ultimately, the situation in Gaza stands at a critical crossroads. Will diplomacy prevail, leading to a desperately needed cessation of hostilities and a pathway towards a more stable future? Or will the familiar cycle of violence continue, condemning another generation to conflict and despair? The current ceasefire proposal, despite the doubt surrounding it, represents a fragile opportunity. Its success or failure will have profound implications not only for the people of Gaza and Israel, but for the stability of the entire Middle East. The choice between continued war and a concerted effort for peace could not be starker. The future of Gaza remains a deeply troubling question, extending far beyond the immediate outcome of these ceasefire talks. Even if a truce is achieved, the underlying issues that fuel this decades-long conflict will persist. The devastation is so extensive that rebuilding will take years, perhaps decades, and billions of pounds. But more than just physical reconstruction, what is needed is a political solution that addresses the legitimate aspirations and security concerns of all parties involved. Without a fundamental shift towards a lasting peace, any ceasefire risks being merely an interlude before the next tragic chapter.